Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, John Woodley. And today, I continue the Pride Month theme with another LGBTQIA plus film. Now, as I mentioned in the last couple of videos, I was a little concerned that I was veering towards coming of age, high school American rom-coms. And so I thought, why not do a coming of age, slightly dour, complex drama about conversion camps with the Chloe Grace Moretz starring The Miseducation of Cameron Post. And from the off, I mean, this is a really interesting film. I mean, the inner workings of a American conservative conversion camp are something that I've been aware of in terms of representation in things like documentary form, in terms of media coverage, but through film, it's not an area that I think has been particularly explored. And I think the trouble is, going into this film, is the fact that obviously I'm not an American conservative, and I haven't grown up in this the kind of environment or community or society that would foster an organisation like this one, this conversion camp. And so it is interesting to sort of see how a place like this could be allowed to function, how a place like this runs, how it indoctrinates young people, and of course how its attitude towards gay and lesbian and bisexual people, and sort of the methods and techniques it uses to undermine their feelings and their self-actualization. And it is an interesting film. I mean, Chloe Grace Moretz, she's in a really, I suppose, a good part of her career. I mean, I was saying the same about Shailene Woodley, who both of them are roughly around the same period, where they've gone from franchises, you know, with Chloe Grace Moretz, of course, it was Kick-Ass, and then, you know, she's gone into more comedy stuff like the Bad Neighbours 2. You know, she sort of experimented with a more fun and pop culture fare, and is now transitioning into more serious dramatic work, just as I say Shailene Woodley was doing with the Mauritanian. And Chloe Grace Moretz has already demonstrated herself as a versatile actor even before this, as someone who has the emotional range and ability to be able to do things from serious performance to nuance to comedy. You know, she can play a teenager, or she can play someone much older or younger than she presents. You know, she is someone who demonstrates a great deal of range. And so when she plays this very confused, this very repressed teenager who already has complex feelings of guilt, of shame, of isolation, and then is brought into this environment where she is essentially being being further repressed and isolated and made to feel feelings of guilt and shame. It really allows Chloe Grace Moretz to play quite a complex character. I suppose the first issue I have with the film is the fact that from the off, I do think there is an element of wanting to play a serious Oscar caliber style of storytelling, and the films that lean more towards that style are much more internalized, are much more quiet, contemplative films, rather than ones that are full of dialogue and full of quite colourful characters. You know, like with Sound of Metal, a film like that is very much about someone processing their state of mind, their situation, as they slowly interact with characters, and I think it much more veers towards that. Unfortunately, the problem there is that means the first half of the film involves following a quiet, repressed teenager who has demonstrated confused feelings, and yet we don't get a chance really to empathise with her because we don't really get a chance to know her. We do see her through flashbacks, and obviously we see her her relationship with her girlfriend, or the friend of hers who she has an emotional and sexual relationship with, even if they never titled it as girlfriend. But you see their relationship. But again, it doesn't really give you a sense of her personality. You don't even really see her relationship with her aunt. We know her parents are dead. And therefore you don't really get a chance to understand her, where she comes from. It's supposed to have more of a blank slate approach, that we as an audience are Cameron Post, and we are experiencing the conversion camp through the eyes of someone who's experiencing it with without too much influence. And I don't necessarily like that. I would rather, because again, as I've talked endlessly, I don't believe in the blank slate principle. I don't believe that if you have a blank character, that is the method by which audiences can then see themselves through that character. I think, a leading character can still be full of personality and identity without audiences feeling alienated from the story. And she is still entering this environment as someone who hasn't experienced it. But I still feel like she enters it with so little personality, and that's really what I needed from the first act, at least, is a sense of who she is as this environment affects her. And perhaps I'm being a little disingenuous. There is a personality there, but as I say, it's a really internalized performance, and it's about someone trying to adjust and adapt. It does have a really strong supporting cast. You have two friends that she makes who are in a similar sort of belief to her, whereas she's more conflicted. These two friends are much more against the camp that they're in and believe that they're sort of having to suffer this until they can leave, as if it's a prison. And then you have the roommate, who is also a fairly complex character, who absolutely buys into this environment and the belief system there. And then you have, of course, the two lead counsellors, therapists. I mean, the one is a psychologist, but they are both sort of the guides, I suppose, which are a brother and sister. The brother being someone who has supposedly been reformed and recovered from his same-sex attraction. And though they are rather obviously unlikable characters, again, because of their relationship to, particularly in the male, what's his name, Rick, you obviously get the conflict within him, someone who has completely had to suppress his true self, and and what that looks like. And the sister, who, frankly, there's something a bit Nurse Ratchety about her, or a little bit Ilsa about her. In terms of, I if there was anything, I wish her character was a little more complicated, because she is very strict, absolutely buys in, believes in the system and enforces it, and really oppresses the people who are staying there, who the patients, convertees, whatever you want to call them. And her personality, therefore, is very, like I say, Nurse Ratched in that respect. But it is an interesting environment to be in, as I say. It's interesting to see how the methods that are applied, also the kinds of people, kids they are. Essentially, they are kids because you couldn't send an adult there, who are sent to that camp, and you get subtext and implication about where each person comes from and why they've ended up there. So, obviously there is the religious aspect to it and sort of the conservative Christian homophobic ideas. But then within that, you have characters like a boy whose father's a governor, and obviously is concerned about the political aspirations and how the son will affect that, or a boy whose father who may not even be gay, but simply is not masculine enough in his father's image, or a girl who is very much a evangelical Christian and feels distressed about her feelings towards that she's had towards fellow choir singers, and you do get this sense of as much as I say, there's this sort of religious core to it. It does reflect the troubling elements that are throughout different parts of American society, and that sort of conservative sense of that idea of there is still a large swathe of America that still believes in sending people to these sorts of camps. But as I say, they do make a good ensemble. My regret is, as I say, because it wants to go for a more serious Oscar-style drama, I would have preferred it to be more like a Breakfast Club type ensemble, where everyone does have slightly bigger personalities and you see them bounce off each other. Frankly, as I was watching the first half, my feeling was, this would make a really good Orange is the New Black style TV series, where you do get flashbacks of each character and you do get that sense of this is where each person comes from as they all sort of bounce off of each other. Whereas, yes, you do get some of that, but it's a much more toned down. It is about Cameron at the end of the day, and it is more about the methods by which the camp manipulates and brainwashes these young people. I mean, that's another element that's actually very interesting, is the ways in which the brainwashing works. As I say, one of the leaders of the camp is a psychologist. And so although there is the fundamentalist sort of evangelical religious aspect, the constant praying, the constant hymns, and sort of the use of sin as a weapon to punish or create shame within the campgoers, there's also other techniques being used, particularly sort of pseudo-psychology. And it's interesting, of course, a film having only been made a couple of years ago, but being set in 1993, how ideas that we now absolutely believe in, things like gender, a fluidity of gender identity, in sort of the types of language we use when it comes to drug rehabilitation or sex rehabilitation, and those are being used and manipulated and applied to not gender identity, but I suppose sexuality and to some degree gender identity, and the idea that this is sort of confusing these, manipulating and confusing ideas that do exist within psychology with doctrine that these people want to apply, because if you can sort of mix truth with manipulation, it is a lot easier to control and brainwash. And that's the interesting aspect, is obviously you see the shift in different characters and how some absolutely stand against it and are forced there, some came in with the idea that they want to be converted, and then you have the ones who vary, particularly Cameron herself, who sort of veers between wanting to buy in and rejecting the ideologies. And so it does have a really interesting core idea and a setting, and like I say, the characters and everything is there, there is just something about it that just, I don't know. It by no means is this is a very good and interesting film, but if it was going for that, like I say, that Oscar caliber, it's just shy for me. There's just something lacking about it, that little bit washed out, just that little bit. I wanted a little more personality to it, whereas it preferred to be quieter and contemplative, and perhaps that would appeal to someone else, but it just it didn't engage me as strongly as I would wanted to going into the film. But yeah, I like I said, I went in with really interested in seeing the film, and again, though it's a coming of age film, it's a very different kind of film from Alex Strangelove or The Half of It. It's funny, really, how I said with The Half of It that I struggled to believe the setting of it and being set today in sort of present-ish day. Whereas Cameron Post is actually set in the early 90s, and yet, to start with, I did think it was set in the modern day. And it's funny how that can shift for me, but regardless, I do think it is an interesting film, and it's a very different kind of coming-of-age film, and a very different kind of queer narrative, so I definitely think it's worth watching. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below and share the video, because those all help me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. And do check out my back catalogue of over 150 videos. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I'm always tweeting about films and TV series, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, sometimes around the same time, sometimes the morning after the upload. Thank you for joining me. Take care.